Welcome and happy Thanksgiving. This is Kamish Orr, and today I'm going to give you a little quick update on the Baseball Maelstrom tournament using History Maker Baseball's all time franchise great set. We're going through a 32 team tournament, all 30 Major League Baseball franchises, and the Yomiuri Giants from the Japanese League, and Homestead Grays from the Negro Leagues. So, we are in the losers bracket right now. So teams that have lost a game, lost their first game, are fighting it out. If they lose two, they're out of the tournament. For those of you who may be wondering about the triple elimination, I actually decided to shorten this one to double elimination just because I have some other projects that I kind of want to try out. I hadn't played History Maker Baseball before I got the tournament started, and now that I've gotten into it a little bit, I think there are some things that I would tweak, and so I'm just doing double elimination to cut down on a little bit on the number of games, and that way I'll be able to start another project a little bit sooner, and I'll talk about that there at the end as well. But first, just a quick recap of the 4 games that I played this week. First, we head to New York. As speaking of the Yomiuri Giants, they faced off against the New York Yankees. This is in the losers bracket. Yankees came in as the number 1 seed in the American League and lost game 1 to who did they lose game 1 to? I guess I can look at that a little bit later. But anyway, so they lost game 1 and facing elimination here against the Japanese League great team, the Yomiuri Giants. They actually squeaked this one out. They led the whole way until the 8th inning. Well, I mean, they led the whole way, but Yomiuri didn't get on the board until the 8th inning. So Ron Guidry kind of took matters into his own hands here. 7 innings pitched, only allowed 4 hits, and 2 earned runs. Both of those came in the 8th. He actually took a 2-hitter, I believe, into the 8th inning. 2-hitter into the 8th here. He was holding the Giants team in check. Meanwhile, Victor Starfin on the mound for the Giants, and the Yankees were able to play a couple of runs early on a couple of RBI singles from Tony Lazzeri and Lou Gehrig. But then in the 7th inning is when they kind of broke things open a little bit, and Derek Jeter led things off the walk. A couple of singles by Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig again, and then Mickey Mantle had a single in there. And so that's when the Giants had to turn to their relief, but it was kind of too late at that point. So New York took a 5-0 lead into the 8th inning. As I said, Guidry had a 2-hit shutout going at that time. And finally, the Giants got something going here with a couple of base hits and a couple of walks. The Yankees turned things over to Sparky Lyle to kind of keep things in check, which he did. Then in the 9th, Yankees had a 5-2 lead in the 9th. Mariano Rivera on the mound, and he actually allowed a home run to Takahashi here in the 9th inning. But that was the only thing that the Giants could do. And so New York advances while the Giants are going to go home. Next up, we head over to Minnesota as the Kansas City Royals took on the Minnesota Twins. A couple of highly rated, highly seeded teams here. I think number 4 and number 5. If we look at the so here's New York. New York, by the way, lost to Seattle in the first round. So, no, I guess not as highly rated as I thought. So 13th and 12th seeded teams here, Minnesota and Kansas City, but pretty closely ranked. And we had Zach Greinke on the mound for the Royals against Bert Blyleven from the Twins. And both pitchers actually did pretty well. Blyleven allowed a couple of hits, 3 hits here in the first inning, and there was a leadoff error by Joe Cronin that led to an unearned run here. And so Kansas City scored 2 runs there in the first. Zach Greinke would allow a run in the fourth on an RBI single. Joe Cronin kind of making up for his error, maybe. Had an RBI single scoring a Herman Killebrew here in the fourth. But those are the only runs that would be scored by either team. Blyleven, even though he allowed 3 hits in the first, only allowed 2 more hits in the next 6 innings. And same thing with Kansas City. Zach Greinke only allowed 5 hits the whole game. And both relief corps were pretty much untouchable, as you can see here. The 8th and 9th inning, nobody even reached base. Dick Hyde for Minnesota struck out 5 in his 2 innings. And Holland shut things out for the Kansas City Royals to pick up the save here. So Kansas City squeaks this one by on a 2-1 win, and Minnesota gets knocked out of the tournament. So next up, we head over to San Francisco, which is the number 1 ranked National League team. They had lost Game 1 to Miami, actually. And so they were trying to stop an embarrassing 0-2 tournament here, coming in as the highest seeded National League team. Teams seeded by their franchise win-loss percentage, by the way. And facing off against the Washington Senators here. We had Gio Gonzalez on the mound for Washington against Carl Hubble from San Francisco on the San Francisco Giants mound. And San Francisco got on the board early here in the first inning on a Willie McCovey RBI single. But they scored a couple of more runs when Mel Ott homered in the 5th. Another low hit game here as San Francisco scored 3 runs on just 4 hits. Meanwhile, Washington finally scored in the 7th on a couple of back-to-back doubles by Al Oliver and Jose Vidro. Those 2 hits were 2 of only 3 hits that Washington had that game. And so Hubble kind of keeps them in check, strikes out 6 in 7 innings, allowed just those 3 hits. And once again, Rob Nen and Rod Beck in the San Francisco bullpen shut things down and send Washington home as San Francisco wins this one 3-1 to advance. Finally, we head over to Chicago as the Cincinnati Reds take on the Chicago Cubs. These 2 teams, I believe, were ranked 3 and 4, 4 and 5. So 4th and 5th seeded teams here. And a little bit of a back and forth battle between the Cubs and the Reds. Bucky Walters on the mound for Cincinnati, facing off against Jake Arrieta for the Cubs. Walters allowed a solo shot to Hack Wilson here in the 2nd inning. And Cincinnati actually got 2 runs back in the top of the 3rd, thanks to a couple of base hits by Ernie Lombardi and Joe Morgan here in the 3rd inning. But as you can see, Arrieta here struck out the side in the 1st and the 3rd, and actually struck out the first 2 batters he saw in the 4th as well. So he had 8 strikeouts in the first 4 innings here. But that didn't stop Cincinnati from scoring. The Cubs actually would take the lead in the bottom of the 3rd on a couple of unearned runs, thanks to an error by Barry Larkin. So they take the lead 3-2 here, but Cincinnati would come back and tie it up in the 5th, thanks to another RBI single from Lombardi. Then in the bottom of the 6th, it looked like the Cubs would kind of take charge again, as they had back-to-back homers by Derek Lee and Billy Williams against Walters. So they had a 5-3 lead at that point. We headed to the 7th, and Barry Larkin had a leadoff double before Lombardi flew out. But then Joe Morgan had an RBI single to cut the lead to 5-4. That's when they turned to the bullpen, Carlos Marmol, and Joey Votto promptly hit a 2-run homer to put Cincinnati in the lead. And that would be where things would end up standing. They would add 3 insurance runs in the 9th off Fergie Jenkins. Frank Robinson with a 2-run homer, and George Foster. So Robinson and Foster go back to back here in the ninth. That put Cincinnati up 9-5, and Rob Dibble and Derringer for the Cincinnati Reds here kind of shut things down. In fact, if you look here, 7 of the last 9 outs were strikeouts here for the Cubs. So they kind of go down quietly as Cincinnati takes this one 9-5 to advance in the tournament. Let's take a look and see where that leaves us tournament wise. So we have these 2 games that happened. So the New York Yankees advanced. They'll play the Toronto Blue Jays here in tomorrow's games, and Kansas City advanced. So Kansas City will face the White Sox here in round 2. Heading over to the National League, San Francisco will play Homestead, the Negro League team, in round 2 here, and Cincinnati will face off against Philadelphia in round 2. Now, the next 2 games, or the next 4 games to play, are Texas will be facing Tampa Bay, Houston will be facing off against Boston, Colorado taking on Milwaukee, and San Diego facing off against Atlanta, the Atlanta Braves here, to finish out the first set of losers bracket games. When all of that is said and done, we'll have 8 teams that will have been eliminated. So the 4 teams that have been eliminated so far are the Yomiuri Giants, the Minnesota Twins, the Washington Nationals, and the Chicago Cubs. So those are the teams that have been eliminated so far. 4 more will join them, and then we'll head on to the next round. So once we get through that, the next day's games will be pretty interesting here because we're down to the final 8 teams in the winners bracket. So that will get narrowed down to the top 4 as we work our way through the tournament here. As I mentioned earlier, double elimination. So we're almost halfway through the tournament at this point. Very interested to see how everything pans out here using History Maker Baseball. I'll have my thoughts as we get closer to the end. I'll have my overall thoughts on History Maker Baseball and kind of what I've liked, what I haven't liked about it, and that kind of thing that I'll share with you guys, and talk about a little bit about my next projects. As most of you know, Payoff Pitch, I have another project in the works for that, but I'm kind of waiting until January after the Hall of Fame ballot or the results are announced, because that'll shake up some of the teams and get me geared up for the start of the second season of my Payoff Pitch League. So stay tuned for that. I think that's where we will leave things today. I appreciate everybody coming by and watching. Hopefully you have a great holiday. Until next time, thanks so much again. Have a great evening.